Good morning. Good to have you with us. I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. Thanks for starting your morning with us. We're going to begin this hour with the latest news out of the Middle East, where strikes continued overnight as the war with Iran stretches into its fifth week. Now, President Trump said in a Truth Social post on Monday, here it is on your screen, that, quote, great progress has been made. But at the same time, if the U.S. and Iran do not reach a deal shortly and the Strait of Hormuz does not reopen, the president says the U.S. will end the war with Iran by, in his words, blowing up and completely obliterating all of their electrical generating plants, oil wells, and Kharg Island, and possibly their water desalination plants.
Iran has rejected President Trump's framing of the talks, denying any direct negotiations with the U.S. Iran's leaders are calling the Trump administration's peace proposals, quote, excessive, unrealistic, and unreasonable. Those mixed messages come as Iran says it is ready for a potential U.S. ground invasion. This week, President Trump told the Financial Times he would like to take the oil in Iran by possibly seizing Kharg Island, which moves 90% of Iran's oil exports. NBC News international correspondent Matt Bradley joins us now from Tel Aviv, Israel, with more. Matt, good morning. Let's start with President Trump's comments threatening to strike civilian water and energy infrastructure if a deal is not reached. Tell us more about how Iran is responding.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I mean, when we talk about Russia and Ukraine, for example, Russia regularly attacks Ukrainian energy installations and other civilian utilities. That is widely condemned as a war crime. And here we have the president of the United States threatening to do just that against Iran, hitting civilian targets in order to pressure the regime. Now, as you mentioned, the Iranians have responded through the foreign ministry spokesperson. First of all, denying that there are any negotiations at all, though he did say, Ismail Baghia, that there are indirect messages that have been passed between the Iranians and the Americans. That could be something that could develop further, but essentially he made it very clear. Nothing in the way of negotiations the way that the president is describing. So it looks as though, as far as the Iranians are concerned, that for now, especially when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz, while they are being defeated militarily, they have the upper hand there and they can continue to hold the world hostage. These competing messages and threats, contradictions that we're hearing both from President Trump himself and the White House, it's not doing a whole lot to tamp turns in this region. This war is aimless and could escalate further.
And Matt, let's move to the latest on the ground. Tell us more about strikes across the Middle East overnight.
That's right. The Israelis and the Americans said that they targeted sites across Iran. This is something that we've been seeing increasing over the past couple of days here in Israel. We actually had about a 36-hour period, perhaps more, just yesterday, that ended yesterday evening with another siren. So it looks as though things may be kind of clearing up a bit in terms of Iranian counterattacks against Israel here. Now, the IDF has been saying for quite a while that Iran's missile salvos against Israel and other targets have thinned out. So while they're still firing all of these missiles in these salvos, there are fewer missiles per salvo. Now, that looks like it could be true. And while I don't want to speak too soon, it does seem as though we're seeing fewer strikes here in Israel, particularly over the last 2 days. And while there have been some injuries, light injuries, it doesn't look as though the Iranians are still continuing to get a lot of hits in.
Matt, we do want to talk about another development out of Israel. The military there has suspended a group of soldiers who were allegedly involved in assaulting and detaining a CNN crew while they were reporting on Israeli settlers in an illegal outpost in a Palestinian village. What do we know about that incident, and what is the IDF saying about it?
Yeah, I mean, this was my colleague and friend Jeremy Diamond with his team in the West Bank for CNN. This was a startling incident and one that actually ended in a mild injury for Jeremy's cameraman for CNN. This is the kind of reporting, and I know you're, as a journalist yourself, you really love to see direct impact. And while it was very unfortunate that this team got beat up, the impact that we're seeing, the direct political implications here in Israel have been really unprecedented. They've now suspended and sent back to training this entire unit that had been operating in the West Bank. And one of the accusations that you heard Jeremy Diamond of CNN saying, and others human rights groups have been saying for so long, is that these uniformed soldiers in the West Bank are acting as settlers. They're essentially settlers themselves. They've been given uniforms over in the past couple of years, and they've been using their uniforms to cloak their abuse of Palestinians in the West Bank and to side with the settlers who are trying to expand Israeli possessions there. So now we're seeing some very direct implications from this. But as Jeremy said himself, this was a very, very swift, very dramatic sense of punishment against this one unit. Why are we not seeing that punishment? And this is a point that Jeremy had made when these officers and these settlers kill Palestinians in the West Bank.
All right. Matt Bradley in Tel Aviv. Matt, thank you so much.
Well, Elise Labott, author of Cosmopolitics on Substack, joins us now from Washington with Analysis Now. Elise, good morning. So our NBC News senior White House correspondent Garrett Haake had a chance to ask White House Secretary Carolyn Leavitt about President Trump's threat to strike civilian infrastructure. This is that Truth Social post we pulled up a little bit ago. Let's listen to what she said.
Of course, this administration and the United States Armed Forces will always act within the confines of the law. But with respect to achieving the full objectives of Operation Epic Fury, President Trump is going to move forward unabated, and he expects the Iranian regime to make a deal with the administration.
Would the U.S. striking Iran's water and energy infrastructure be any violation of international law?
Well, what military experts and international law experts say is that it could be if, look, some of the IRGC and the Iranian military, they do control some of these energy targets. And so if you're attacking a target that is used by the military for military purposes, then it may not be. But look, the Iranians people depend on clean water. Those desalination plants are definitely a civilian infrastructure, and that could be violation of international law. Regardless, I mean, if it's causing additional suffering, disproportionate harm to the Iranian people, then you get into the idea of whether this violates international law. And I think what most international law experts and military experts would say, keep it on those military targets, keep it on those weapons targets, the goals that the president laid out, the Navy, the weapons depots, the missiles, the nuclear sites, and don't focus on civilian and energy infrastructure that even if the IRGC or the military control will have harm to the Iranian people.
You know, Elise, President Trump also seemed to confirm in an interview with the New York Post yesterday the U.S. is negotiating with Iran's parliamentary speaker. What do we know about this new figurehead?
Well, Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf is a very interesting figure. He came up of the ranks of the IRGC, but also has a lot of ties to the intelligence, to the clerics. He's believed to be an insider of the new Ayatollah Mujtaba Khamenei, although we haven't heard from him yet. And he's seen to be someone that could kind of straddle both sides. He is known to be an ambitious man, and you can see that he can be pragmatic on some level, but also he seems to be taunting President Trump, talking about that President Trump is trying to play the oil markets. He's using memes. I mean, they're really, you know, kind of trolling President Trump now, using that information war on the internet. He denies, guys, that there have been talks. It's clear that there are indirect talks going on, but those kind of direct negotiations are not happening, and the sides are still, I think, pretty far apart before that could happen.
Elise, this morning, gas prices here in the U.S., they did pass that $4 mark for the first time.
They sure did.
Since the war began. Americans are obviously feeling the impact of this war with Iran. That's a really key way. Do you think that this motivates the president to find a way out of this war?
Well, listen, I think the president wants at first to deal with the energy crisis that we're having. So that would be opening up the Strait of Hormuz. And there are two ways he can do that. He could do it militarily, or he could do it through negotiations. And the negotiations are far apart. The two sides are far apart. President Trump has his 15-point plan. The Iranians have their plan, and the Iranians aren't going to unconditionally surrender. And President Trump isn't going to, you know, pay them for what the damage that they did and pull out of the Middle East with no concessions from the Iranians. So they're still far apart. But I do think President Trump wants to open the Strait of Hormuz. You see, guys, all of those troops headed towards the region. I don't think we're looking at a full-scale kind of ground invasion, but those troops could be used to, seize Card Island that we've been talking about, that small island that controls all of Iranian, that holds all of Iranian oil, and it really is the key to opening up the Strait of Hormuz. So if negotiations fail, I think that's what President Trump wants to do. And then, if he gets the Strait of Hormuz going and he can kind of the Navy or maybe a coalition of countries come in and help getting those tankers through, then I think President Trump, as they continue those targets, they've already met a lot of the targets, they could start to wind down, maybe a few more weeks. All
right. Elise Labott, thank you so much.
The war with Iran appears to be one of the factors dragging down President Trump's approval rating in a new national poll. The UMass Amherst survey finds approval of President Trump's job performance falling to 33% last week. It is the lowest rating of his second term so far.
On the issue of this war with Iran, 63% of Americans polled said the president is handling the war poorly, but it's worth noting those views were sharply polarized. 71% of Republicans said Trump is handling Iran well, compared to just 15% of independents, 1% of Democrats.
NBC News national political reporter Sahil Kapoor joins us with more on this. Sahil, good morning. I mean, this is the latest in a string of recent surveys and polls showing the president struggling with public support, especially when it comes to Iran. Is this raising any alarms among Republicans as we get closer to those November midterms?
Yes, it certainly is raising alarms, guys. 33% is a very troubling number for the party in power going into a midterm election, given that these often tend to be referendums on the president. There is a trend that we've seen across recent polls where President Trump's approval rating has fallen. And if you dig into the internals, just in this UMass Amherst poll, he's down double digits with independents and moderates. The issue breakdown across these various polls is also problematic for the GOP. Trump's approval has crashed on the economy and the cost of living, the single most important reason he was sent back to the White House. He's been underwater, as you mentioned, on the Iran war. He's still hurt by the battle over the Epstein file. And he's even slipped on the issue of immigration, which was his strongest issue. So that's one cause for alarm, the president's declining approval. And the second is the structure of the coalitions. Democrats are now winning over the most regular voters who reliably turn up to elections, whether it's midterms, special elections. It's one reason Democrats have flipped 10 Republican-held seats since Trump went back to the White House, and Republicans have not flipped a single one because they are very reliant now on those irregular voters, the MAGA voters who don't really turn out unless Trump is on the ballot.
Sahil, we want to ask you about another issue that's been gaining traction in Washington, and we've been talking about here on our show. This push for scrutiny over online prediction markets. There's this debate whether the wagers that are placed on platforms, these are places like Polymarket, Kalshi, are they considered gambling or not? We had more than 40 lawmakers sign a letter yesterday calling on federal regulators to address multiple incidents that have, quote, prompted speculation about possible insider trading in prediction markets by federal employees. Tell us about this.
That's right. This is a letter led by dozens of members of Congress in the House and Senate, all of them Democrats, led by Elizabeth Warren, the senator, to the CFTC and the Office of Government Ethics, asking them to inform federal employees about their obligation not to use insider information to profit from prediction markets like Polymarket and Kalshi. They cite the exponential growth in prediction market trading. They mention rising evidence suggesting possible government insider trading in prediction markets. They cite sudden trades timed to things like the death of the Iranian Supreme Leader, the capture of Nicolas Maduro, and even the timing of a White House press conference that delivered huge profits, wondering, are these people just getting lucky, or do they potentially know something that's delivering these handsome profits? They also ask whether the CFTC has investigated instances of this and what steps, if any, they're taking to detect it in the future. The White House, for its part, said this is already prohibited and denied that it's occurring among administration officials and insiders, guys.
Sahil, before we let you go, we want to ask you about the ongoing partial government shutdown. The White House now calling on members of Congress to come back from their spring recess early to fully fund the Department of Homeland Security. Let's listen to some of what Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said yesterday. We'll talk on the other side.
The president just can't keep signing presidential memorandums and proclamations every time Congress fails to do its job and every time Democrats are holding our entire country hostage. The president has stepped in to do the right thing at this moment in time, but the president is also encouraging Congress to come back to Washington to permanently fix this problem and to fund and reopen the Department of Homeland Security entirely.
Sahil, I understand some lawmakers did meet for a brief session yesterday. Walk us through what happened and just anything you're hearing about any plans to return early.
Yeah, so this was a pro forma session in the Senate. That's just, that's just something where lawmakers meet for about 2 minutes, which is how long it took. They don't conduct any business. They didn't conduct any business this time. The reason there was some attention on this is that there was some chatter among Republicans that some of them wanted their designee to the Senate floor for this pro forma session to try to bring up the House-passed DHS bill and at least try to force a vote on it. Democrats were prepared for this. All they needed is one senator to object, and Senator Chris Coons of Delaware was there in case Republicans tried to do it. And they didn't even try to do it. So the gavel dropped within 2 minutes of this pro forma session beginning, and no action was taken. The Republican designee there was John Hoeven. Take a listen to what these two senators said.
I was here just in case there were some shenanigans and there was a Democrat needed to block an attempt at taking up and passing the SAVE Act, which would disenfranchise millions of Americans, or full funding for DHS with no reforms for ICE or Border Patrol.
The Democrats, as you know, hold the cards in this case in the Senate, needing 60 votes to pass short of reconciliation. And the only way in which we can really get this done if the Democrats come on board or use reconciliation.
And bottom line, DHS remains unfunded. This is the longest shutdown of a federal department in U.S. history. And there's no indication, guys, not right now, that either the Senate or the House are going to come back early from recess. They're scheduled to be back at this time on April 13th.
All right, Sahil Kapoor covering all things Washington. Thank you.
Let's now bring in NBC News senior Homeland Security correspondent Julia Ainsley for more. Julia, good morning. So let's start with this shutdown. I mean, TSA workers, they're starting to get that back pay this week, but there is still this big impact of the government shutdown on other workers since this full Department of Homeland Security is not back to normal. By the way, airports still not back to normal either. But who is going to continue to feel the brunt of this ongoing shutdown?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, what they've paid is basically the periods 4 and 5 of TSA back pay. That does not fulfill period 3 where they got partial pay, and there's no indication they're going to get paid in these 2 weeks where Sahil has indicated there's really no effort so far that we're seeing from Congress to come back and pass anything. That emergency funding bill just addressed that 4 and 5 period of back pay. And it doesn't do anything about other workers at DHS who the American public might not have front-facing interactions with every day, but they are impacted by. People like the Coast Guard, FEMA, Secret Service. These are major agencies that have a lot of people who are going unpaid and are also either not coming to work or just not getting paid and getting increasingly frustrated by these important jobs. I mean, some of these people with FEMA need to be there approving money, getting it out the door, and getting it to state and locals who are dealing with ongoing crises, even those dating back to previous hurricanes. That is something that FEMA is continually doing and preparing for the next hurricane season. And without that funding, they're further behind.
Julia, another headline in your beat, the Trump administration now set to resume reviewing asylum cases that had paused applications following the shooting of 2 National Guard members in Washington. That was last November. They were shot by an Afghan man who had received asylum. So walk us through how the administration came to this decision.
Yeah, that's right. This was just after Thanksgiving, after that shooting where they did a pause on all asylum applications, no matter the nationality. That Afghan man had entered during the Biden administration, but his asylum application had been approved in 2025 under Trump. They put everything on pause. That is what an asylum application is different from refugees that apply outside of the country. They're people who apply here, but they go through a process by USCIS or an immigration court where they are approved. And they put all of the USCIS applications on pause. Now they're resuming that, except for 39 countries. That's a lot of countries. And those are the people that are part of Trump's travel ban. So the other countries they consider non-high risk, and those people can now resume their process through the asylum application process, which also includes work authorization, which is so critical for people waiting years often for that approval.
Julia, one other piece of news, we're learning about plans for ICE agents to be stationed outside of upcoming graduation events for the U.S. Marine Corps. Tell us about what they're doing. Walk us through your reporting here.
Yeah, if that sounds unbelievable, it sounded unbelievable to me as well. My colleague Courtney Cubey first heard about this. She's covering the Pentagon, and the Marines told her in no uncertain terms that ICE will be at basic training graduation for the Marines on Friday in Parris Island, South Carolina, and they'll be doing ID checks. ICE says, though, they will not be doing arrests there at that time.
All right, Julia Ainsley, thank you so much.
The countdown is now officially underway for the launch of NASA's historic Artemis 2 mission. Tomorrow night, 4 astronauts are scheduled to lift off from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida for a 10-day journey around the moon. It is the first voyage of its kind since the Apollo 17 mission in December of 1972. Our NBC News senior correspondent Tom Costello is using virtual reality to get a look at the details behind this highly anticipated launch.
Okay, so this is super cool. We've come here to Noticias Telemundo Studios using their augmented reality technology to show you how NASA has built one of the largest, most powerful rockets ever. And this is it. It is called SLS. That stands for Space Launch Systems. And it stands 322 feet tall. That is taller than the Statue of Liberty. It is massive. And it features 4 engines right there at its base, along with those 2 booster rockets. So that combined force right there will provide the thrust needed to lift 7 million pounds into space. That's the equivalent of roughly 700 elephants. Located right there, very tip of the rocket, that is the Orion capsule. And that is the spaceship that 4 astronauts will ride in to travel to the moon or around the moon. And if you're wondering what will this mission in space actually be like, to explain that, we need to simulate the launch of the rocket stack. There you go, by the 1-minute mark. The rocket has already reached supersonic speeds. 2 minutes in, the booster rockets separate. And at 8 minutes, the Orion capsule reaches space. And that marks one of the most critical moments of the mission, when the capsule separates from the rocket, the start of a 10-day mission to orbit around the moon. Okay, and this is what will happen once in space. Take a look. You can see the Orion space capsule that will enter an orbit around the Earth, going around twice. And then it will head towards the moon, where then it will reach its furthest, or hopes to reach, the furthest the humans have ever traveled into space, 280,000 miles from Earth, something never before achieved. All of this will be accomplished in just 10 days. A mission that then paves the way for a future return to the lunar surface, and maybe a permanent establishment of a human presence on our own natural satellite.
Very cool, Tom. Let's keep the cool conversation going. After years of prep and anticipation, we are now just about 36 hours away from liftoff. The countdown clock began ticking yesterday afternoon. NASA flight controllers are now in the midst of the final checks of flight and ground systems.
As of now, liftoff is scheduled for 6:24 p.m. Eastern time tomorrow from the launch pad 39B. The 4 astronauts on this mission remain in quarantine this morning to limit their exposure to germs. The crew says Artemis 2 is the start of an era in which people on Earth can see the moon as, quote, a destination.
For more on the final preps before liftoff, let's bring in Dr. Paul Sutter. He's a cosmologist at Johns Hopkins University and the author of How to Die in Space. Doctor, good to have you with us one more time. I guess just how excited are you? I mean, let's start with this time, what it looks like for the crew. Walk us through the next day and a half for them. What's going to be their priority at this point?
Oh, yeah, I'm getting excited, very excited. I'm getting nervous, and I'm not even going to space. I'm just watching it from the comfort of my own living room, but I'm still getting excited and nervous. And yes, this is a very, very critical time for the astronauts. They are in a sort of quarantine because we don't want anyone getting sick during this critical 10-day mission. They are reviewing all the mission materials. Remember, this is a test flight. They will be manually operating some of the procedures here during the mission. So they are practicing and rehearsing these procedures. They're going over the mission profile. They're getting updates. And most importantly, they are resting. This is going to be 10 days of non-stop stress and work and focus. So we need these astronauts as rested and well-fed as possible.
Well, tell us more about NASA's final preparations for a mission like this. What does this period look like? Less than 36 hours until takeoff. How's this mission different than those that we saw a long time ago, and how's the preparation different?
Yeah, this is in a period of intense activity. This is all planned, all choreographed, all rehearsed, months, even years in advance. Now it is the time to execute those plans and execute that choreography. It's about fueling the rockets. It's about doing the test checks. It's about rehearsing the mission. All of that is being put in place in these final few hours as the rocket is prepared to go. And this mission, Artemis 2, is very, very different different than Apollo. One, we're doing it for a fraction of the budget that the Apollo missions had. This is like a shoestring budget compared to what we were doing in the 50s and 60s. And second, this isn't just to visit the moon, it's to begin to establish a long-term permanent presence on the moon. So the mission profile is totally different. This is not a tourist trip. This is the first steps to moving in.
As we talk about that step, these are going to be the first humans to see some parts of the moon up close. So what is it they're going to learn from the types of testing and experiments they're going to be conducting on this mission?
Yes, as they orbit the far side of the moon. Remember, half the moon is permanently invisible to us here on the Earth. The moon always shows the same face towards the Earth. So it wasn't until the 1950s that we even got our first look at the far side. And the far side of the moon is radically different than the near side. There's much more crater activity. There's much more variation in terrain. The geology is different. And so as part of this mission, it's not just a test mission. They will be doing actual science and doing close observation and photography of the far side of the moon to help us learn about the history of the moon, the formation of the moon, which tells us about the formation and history of the Earth itself.
Dr. Paul Sutter, your enthusiasm is helping fuel our enthusiasm. We're all getting very excited as this countdown continues. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, now let's get a check of our Morning News Now weather for tomorrow's landmark launch.
Angie Lassman is feeling the enthusiasm and the excitement.
I sure am. I'm a big space fan, guys. And the good news that I'm seeing right now when it comes to the launch tomorrow is we're not really looking at a whole lot of impacts during that launch window. We could maybe see a couple of these showers and thunderstorms, sea breeze kind of activity working its way into the interior of the state of Florida here tomorrow around noontime. But by the time 6:24 to 8:24 rolls around, we're looking at mainly light winds and some scattered clouds. Temperatures will hang out into those 70s, winds about 10 miles per hour. As we get into Thursday, if it doesn't happen Wednesday and we've got to push to Thursday, there's a better chance that we could see some thunderstorms. So that wouldn't be, of course, what we want. And winds will be elevated to 20 miles per hour out of the southeast. And if worse comes to worse and we're pushing things to Friday, we're still going to have that chance of showers around. And you can see anywhere from 8 to 10 p.m. the impact will be there for the clouds and the showers across this region. So still some time to watch. We'll be, of course, keeping a close eye on that. Meanwhile, it's quite active across the northeast. We've got this line of showers and thunderstorms kind of working its way into the interior and eventually out towards the coast. It does have some snow involved with it here as we get farther to the north, but notice that flood watch is up across parts of New York. This is going to leave us with that potential through at least the morning hours, your morning commute specifically, where you could run into some of that ponding, and even as we get into the second half of the day too. This is thanks to a frontal system that's kind of stretched from really Maine all the way to Missouri. It does have that potential to fire up some stronger storms later today. So if you live in the Detroit area, Indianapolis, Chicago, Pittsburgh, stretching up to Buffalo and Williamsport, you're going to see the potential for some strong wind gusts up to 60 miles per hour today. Damaging hail also on the table, and I wouldn't rule out a couple of these tornadoes. And this lasts for the afternoon hours into this evening. That's 8 p.m. You can see the potential is there for some of those stronger storms to fire up. As we look ahead to tomorrow, we'll see more of those storms and the flood risk in the picture, but now the flood risk will be across the plains, and we'll see those stronger storms from Texas to eastern Kansas. Notice the hail, the wind gusts are the main threat, but again, a couple of tornadoes will be likely for Kansas City to Oklahoma City and stretching down to Abilene. And we are not done there. Let's keep watching that same system. As we look ahead to the Great Lakes on Thursday, that's where you'll see the change of some strong thunderstorms over the Ohio River Valley as well. Detroit, Cincinnati, St. Louis, Chicago, all included in that. And then here comes a big temperature contrast. We've got some chilly conditions that will be settled into parts of New England and New York. Notice the 41-degree high temperature in Boston, but the 77-degree temperature in Washington, D.C. Guys, it's spring. We cannot make up our mind about what season we're in, but we're getting all of it on the table.
Sandwich in the middle is rain, basically,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
That's how that works.
Yeah, great.
Thanks, Angie.
You got it.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.